Quotes. People say them, others listen to them, and throughout the long history of fiction there have been a lot of great ones. Today we'll be picking apart the quotes of Nagisa Furukawa, clannad's airheaded sweetheart, because I will literally create new video formats on the fly just so I can talk about clannad again. The way this works is I've put a handful of her quotes into 3 distinct categories, and after discussing all of them I'll be picking my favorite of the bunch. 2 things to keep in mind before we get started. There are spoilers in this video, and while you're watching, I'd like you to give some thought to your personal favorite quote. I'll be asking for your answer in the near future, so more on that later. For now, say hi to Nagisa. She's many things: a ridiculously kind crybaby, an evil drama club president, and one of my favorite main characters in this entire medium. She spends her days looking for ways to reform the drama club at school, as it's her dream to perform on stage, but there are a lot of things that stand in the way of this. Her physically weak body caused her to repeat senior year of high school twice thanks to a mysterious fever that wouldn't go away. Repeating 2 years of school does not give you the best public image, regardless of the cause, and she wasn't exactly attracting any friends to begin with because she's extremely shy. Yet through it all, she manages to persevere. The way she encourages herself to take another step forward every day is indicative of her strong character, and it's only amplified by her tendency to put the needs of others before her own. Everything about her radiates with this sense of innocence and joy, which is why our first quote for today is "We are having sex." This shit was over before it started. Allow me to introduce our first category, the meme squad. I would be remiss if I didn't include all the stupid, funny things characters have to say, because these quotes are amazing and they deserve to be appreciated. Take a second to behold the majesty of this scene. Akio is intentionally making things difficult for everyone by pretending that he doesn't know where babies come from. The correct way to get out of this situation is to ignore him, but for sincere little Nagisa, this just won't do, so she admits to getting her biscuit buttered by the guy standing next to him. You'll notice as we go on that a lot of great Nagisa jokes use her inability to take anything above face value to make her do something really dumb. But I can't act like her nature doesn't come with any perks. Just take a look at her aforementioned kindness. Our second category of quotes are the wild cards. These are the more obscure ones. They aren't the first things you think of when you envision a character, but they're all here for good reason. I picked this first one because it's one of the best examples we see of Nagisa being the most compassionate person alive. Nagisa and Tomoya are planning to go to the Founders Festival together. They weren't able to walk the grounds last year because of some hardcore depression, but now they have that chance. The only problem is Tomoya screwed up a job the night before, so he rushes over to take responsibility for his mistakes because that's just the kind of guy he is. Unfortunately, this left Nagisa to stand at the school gates for hours. And if this doesn't look comically sad enough for you, she also has 2 snacks from the festival in her arms. Tomoya comes running up to her in his work clothes, and immediately Nagisa says, "I figured you were out working." Tomoya then apologizes to her, and she responds with this.
ともやくんは何も謝るようなことしてないです。これ一緒に食べてくれますか?
Nothing reasonable like, "Hey, what the hell," or "Why didn't you just tell me?" No, all she has to give is reassurance and a really cold grilled corn on the cob. One of Nagisa's biggest appeals as a character is just how wonderful of a person she is. It's her initial hook that anyone can immediately notice and appreciate. And as we get into the first from our third category of quotes, you'll see that her kindness extends far beyond forgiveness. These are the heavy hitters. They're the big, iconic quotes that are inseparable from the identity of the character in question, and they're also probably going to win every time. This quote comes from moments after Tomoya graduates and finds Nagisa waiting for him at the bakery. He successfully moved on to the next stage of his life, leaving Nagisa behind because her illness held her back once again, and he feels terrible about it. He lets his emotions overflow as he tells her that he should have repeated too, that he shouldn't have thrown away the only fun he's ever had at this school just because it's supposed to be over. Nagisa then brings things back to a rational level by saying this.
そんなことで足を止めたらダメです。進めるなら進むべきなんです。ともやくんは進んでください。
As similar as this quote is to the previous one, it sticks out in my mind much more because of the clever foreshadowing. I talked a lot about how much I value stories that feel planned in my other two clannad videos, and this quote is a perfect example of why I did. We all know about Nagisa's death, it's the biggest twist in the entire story. But when I was reading through the visual novel for the first time, the poor sweet naive child that I was, I had no idea. Nowadays, I adore the fact that I can go back and notice the writers planting all these little seeds. Nagisa tells Tomoya that he needs to move on, that he needs to face forward and not let the past jeopardize his future. This picks him up after the whole graduation situation, but his faith in these words is put to the ultimate test when the person who said them bites the dust. You watch him spiral into this self-destructive lifestyle, all the while keeping the advice that's going to save him in the back of your mind. And when he sees Nagisa again after Ushio passes away, she repeats the exact same sentiments as before, reminding both him and the audience that the answer he was looking for was staring him in the face the whole time. This reinforces the idea that anyone can find a purpose in life by cherishing all the little things they take for granted, by remembering what's important to them and pursuing it with conviction. But I'm getting ahead of myself. While it does do a great job of hinting at the lesson Tomoya learns at the end of the story, I was talking about Nagisa's death. I caught on to the foreshadowing in this quote while watching the anime because I didn't pick up on any of the red flags in the visual novel until Nagisa told Tomoya they'll always be together. Actually, that's a lie. I first learned about Nagisa's death because I was foolish enough to type clannad Nagisa into Google and not think 10 billion people all searched for the same thing. All of you are collectively responsible for this, and I hope you feel genuinely terrible about it. Alright, let's calm down. I've always believed that something funny is the best way to turn a frown upside down, so it's a good thing that this quote is next. Real quick, let's go over two things we know about Nagisa. She lives in a bakery, and she isn't the brightest bulb in the bunch. I reminded you of this because I have a soft spot for dream sequences that take basic features of a character and then reduce them to the most asinine interpretation possible. Tomoya is currently asleep, talking with Kotomi in his dream. She's practicing the violin so she can enter comedy school, and to show this, she starts playing some incomprehensible piece and singing about dango flowers. The word dango gives Tomoya an ominous feeling, so he turns around to find Nagisa with a massive cauldron. When he asks what she's doing, she says, "I'm boiling bread." Why are you doing that, Nagisa? The best part is, the bread is a sentient family of dongos, and when Nagisa pours the liquid from the pot all over them, their skin melts off. This is eloquently described by the visual novel with the phrase, "the whole family died," and Furukawa panics at the sight. Putting aside the comedic value I get from watching a family of pastries get boiled alive, this is a very impactful quote that teaches us something valuable about Nagisa, more so than any other quote I've discussed so far. She's stupid. Next level stupid. Like, oh my god, are you sure you didn't graduate just because you were sick? And we can see her questionable brain power on full display with our next wildcard quote.
この先の困難に負けずに頑張れ。ありがとうございます。難しい名前の人。
You know, maybe I am being a little too hard on her. From my understanding, kanji is really hard to understand, and Tomoya and Sunohara made it intentionally difficult for her. This is a fun little moment that comes from one of After Story's OVAs. Adapted from Clannad's Side Stories of all things, a game my friend regrets buying for me because it's essentially a radio drama. Chronologically, this is the first real interaction Nagisa has with Tomoya. The message he wrote on the banner was meant for incoming freshmen who don't know what they're in for, but as if by fate, it ends up in the hands of a senior who needed it more than anyone. When she wakes up in the nurse's office, she sees a girl from her class who, unbeknownst to her, had been looking for an opportunity to become friends. Nagisa is about to turn her down because of her lack of self-confidence, but then she sees the banner and decides that it's okay. I really like the idea of Tomoya being able to give Nagisa courage months before he ever meets her properly. As for the quote itself, it's nice and sweet. And considering that this is the last thing we hear from Kyoani's Nagisa, I can't think of a better way to send her off than with the words that set her on the course to meeting Tomoya. It's perfect. And speaking of perfect lines, I have nothing but nice things to say about Nagisa's graduation speech. She starts by mentioning all the hardships she went through, all the time she spent stuck as a senior in this school. Every time she went back, her entire world had changed around her. However, she's stuck in place. She sits through classes that she's already taken, memorizing facts that she's already learned, while every other person she's come to know gets to move on with the rest of their lives. Personally, I could barely stand one senior year of high school. It sits in this awkward middle ground between your past and your future. Every action you take is supposed to prepare you for the next big step in your life, but you're forced to burn through months of time doing nothing before you can actually take it. If I was forced to repeat that time in my life twice, each time having to find new friends because the ones I had are gone now, I would have snapped. I can't even begin to imagine how frustrating this must have been. And while I'm sitting here with all these negative thoughts swirling around in my head, Nagisa concludes her speech with this.
卒業するのに5年もかかってしまいましたが、大好きな学校です。頑張れた私が過ごした場所だからです。
It's the sheer contentment of this statement, the miraculous way in which she finds value in even the worst of experiences, that makes this quote so special. I know I'd be talking about how much this place sucks and how I never want to set foot in it ever again, going off about how much of a waste of time it was. But Nagisa is able to express her affection towards this school because it's the place that pushed her to become a better version of herself. It's just beautiful. I don't know what else I can say. So with that being said, let's talk about the time Nagisa was tricked into asking out another girl. We've seen some jokes that take advantage of Nagisa's half-witted nature, but now we're gonna take it one step further by adding Tomoya to the equation. The reason why she pairs up so well with Tomoya comedically is because her responses to whatever ridiculous scenario he throws her into are always so genuine. Take this scene where Nagisa wants to ask Ryo if she'll help her reform the drama club. The only catch is, Tomoya and Sunohara got Ryo to show up to talk to her by saying that there's someone who wants to confess to her. Nagisa starts hitting every single beat without knowing it. She apologizes for being so sudden, she mentions how much she admires her, and then, with the conviction of God, she says this.
お話があるんです。聞いていただけますか?
Tomoya and Sunohara dogpile on to keep the joke running for as long as possible before Nagisa finally drops the bomb that this is just about the drama club. The cherry on top is Ryo says yes to Nagisa before she even understands that she was being lied to. It's a masterpiece of a scene, and I'm going to keep this momentum going with a surprise fourth quote, because while I wanted to cut things down to 3 per category for the sake of time, I just couldn't bring myself to leave this one out. My bad. This joke is noteworthy for having the most promising setup out of all of them. Nagisa takes a sip of alcohol and immediately becomes drunk. She moves to sit closer to Tomoya, and when Sanai makes a comment about it, Tomoya replies as any normal person would. But then Nagisa grabs his attention back and asks, "Are you really that interested in Mom?" We then get some good banter that heightens the joke, but the biggest appeal for me is the fact that the writers somehow found a way to put Tomoya in a situation where he has to romantically choose between Nagisa and her mom while her dad sits there encouraging the conflict. Just saying that sentence out loud makes me think there's something seriously wrong with my sense of humor. I guess it could be worse though. Like, what if I found Nagisa's breakdown on stage funny? This isn't necessarily a quote so much as it is a series of various sniffles and whimpers, but I believe it deserves a mention because of how powerful it is. It has a very simple yet effective build-up. It combines a very important moment with some awful news at the worst possible timing. Nagisa has been feeling guilt about something she may have done to her parents in the past because she's unusually perceptive when it comes to her own faults. And when she learns that they gave up on their dreams so they could raise her right before her big play at the school festival, it's all over. You know something bad is going to happen at this play, and there's nothing you can do about it, so you just sit there in suspense praying that the story doesn't go go where you think it's going to go. And well, I knew it would be bad, but I definitely didn't expect her to start crying on stage. Props to Kyoani for really bringing the emotions in this scene to life. I considered using the quote where Nagisa says she's positive she did something very bad to her parents when she was little, as it's a great example of this self-defeating mindset that she has, but no words can speak louder and clearer than these tears. The amount of self-contempt on display coming from somebody who didn't do anything wrong is astonishing and exceptionally frustrating to watch, but it's also a big reason why Nagisa is such a compelling character to me. If she was just the greatest person ever who's nice to everyone and never has any problems, her character would be awful, but this moment stomps out any chance of that being the case. Nagisa's fatal flaw is that while she sees the best in other people, she can only see the worst in herself. And this mindset is why she struggles with making friends, why she often tries to back out of opportunities because she's worried she'll mess up, and why she was about to throw away her dream over something that wasn't even her fault. I can understand why some people would think that this kind of character isn't fun to watch. I mean, in a vacuum, who would really want to observe the life of a crybaby who's nice to everyone? But one thing I'll never understand is how people can claim she lacks any sort of depth, saying she's just some ideal robotic figure with no emotions. I don't see how a character with flaws so relatable, portrayed in such a powerful and realistic way, could be described like this. Nagisa's strengths extend far beyond the confines of the story too. I think there's a lot of nuance to the way she was constructed as a character. The way she meshes with the other characters and the overall narrative is nothing short of phenomenal to me, and there isn't a single quote that encapsulates this depth more than the first thing we ever hear her say. Do you like this school? I love it very, very much. But everything changes eventually. Fun things, happy things, they'll all eventually change. Even so, can you still love this place? It's certainly an odd thing to say to yourself, but I think that after everything we've learned about her today, it's safe to say that this is totally something she would do. Try to rationalize her anxieties out loud in public because she's a space case who needs a little courage. And while making a quote make sense for a character to say is nothing special, the fact that it works while being so interconnected with every single aspect of the narrative is. Where do I even begin? There's the parallel between Nagisa and Tomoya. They're both struggling against time, but in opposite ways. Tomoya wants time to pass him by, so hopefully something can come along and make a positive change in his life. And Nagisa wants to go back so she can experience all the fun and happy things she had in the past. When Tomoya tells her to go find new things to be happy about, he pulls her back into the present. And Nagisa gives Tomoya those fun and happy experiences in return, giving them both exactly what they were looking for. This quote also plants the seeds for the tragedy that's going to befall these characters by mentioning how everything will eventually change. The fact that Nagisa is standing at the foot of the hill is clear symbolism for the long journey that's about to unfold, non-verbally communicating the intent of the narrative within the first 5 seconds. And what's even cooler is the way it foreshadows clannad's main message, a message it communicated to me over the course of 65 hours in 4 sentences. It does this by treating the school as a microcosm for life. Everything changes eventually, nothing is sacred, and life can be really hard and awful sometimes. But even so, can you still love living it? If you were to ask me to sum up what clannad is in 1 sentence, I would say that it's a beautiful story about a man who hates his life because of its hardships, learning to love living it in spite of them. Therefore, a quote that asks both that man and the audience whether or not they can be content with life even when it changes is mind-blowing. Couple that with the fact that it's delivered so naturally given Nagisa's character, and that it's the first spoken line you ever hear, it's nothing short of perfect. Never in my life have I come across a quote that so accurately sums up the whole of a work before. The idea that it's always important to remember all the wonderful things you have, that staying frozen in place out of fear will only lead to a life full of regrets, that finding a purpose is as easy as finding something you love and sticking by it for as long as you can. Anything that you could possibly glean from this story story can be traced back to this short conversation at the foot of the hill to school. I love clannad, and whenever I go back to it, this quote is always there to remind me of why I do. I don't think I need to tell you that this is my favorite quote of the bunch, but I should probably mention the runner-ups from the other categories and where all of you come in before we leave today. For the meme squad, I'm going with I have something to tell you, will you hear me out? Because it's by far the funniest of the quotes I mentioned. Nagisa doesn't have a lot of quotes that the internet really took a hold of unless you count her singing Dango Daikazoku, so I judged this category solely off of how well written I thought the jokes were. For the wild cards, I'm gonna go with her breakdown on stage, as it's such a powerful representation of her flaws as a character. The rest just can't compare. And with that being said, now it's your turn. In the description, there's a poll where you can pick your favorite quote from the ones you've seen today, as well as an other option in case I screwed up so bad that I didn't even mention your favorite. I'm aware that I left out some pretty big ones. If you all like this kind of video, I'll make more of these and put the poll results of the previous one in the newest one. Also, if you want to discuss your own favorite quotes or if you have any criticisms for this video, please let me know in the comments. One of my favorite parts of doing this is seeing what all of you have to say, so I really wanted to make something that would spark discussion. And I also don't have a clue about what I'm doing, so any suggestions would be greatly appreciated. So yeah, poll in the description, Nagisa is great, clannad is the best, see you all next time.